All right, I am committed to saying something different.
No, I have to add more to the thing. Come on, the
Maybe
compilation.
maybe for special occasions we'll do the normal intro, but we have to say
Fine.
something interesting every single time. So what's interesting?
The Breaking Bad ending is overrated. That's the one. It's the one take that's gotten me in a lot of trouble with my own audience. It's the one I think that most don't agree with me on.
We'll just start these off with hot takes from now on.
Yeah, and then we'll just go from
Just some
there,
real subversive shit.
and then see if people get pissed off enough, we'll just like follow up with the next episode.
Absolutely. Well, cool. Well, welcome to another episode. How have you been this week?
I'm good. I'm prepping up. Given my Avatar, my next video is on Avatar: The Last Airbender. Have you ever seen that show? I
Oh
don't know if
yeah,
I've asked you. Oh, you
I'm
have.
a
Okay.
huge fan. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then maybe we could talk about that then, because I would love to get your thoughts on it. Because I'm starting my I'm giving it another like quick rewatch just to kind of like organize my thoughts. But I'm pretty sure I have a general outline of my arguments. I'm overall I'm very positive of the series. Um, However, I know usually I don't do this. Usually I stay away from like other reviews and I just do my own like analysis. However, because in this case it's such like an overly beloved series, I actually went ahead and watched any YouTube videos I could find that had like a negative take on it, of which there are like 8, and all the comments are just like, no, you're wrong, or here's why you're wrong, or here's why this was explained.
No, Avatar
Um,
is widely beloved. Like I've never heard a single negative thing. There's a couple episodes here and there that people don't really like. Batu of the Water Tribe is one that people. The Divide. That's another episode that people don't really like that episode in particular. But in terms of the whole series, super popular. Now,
mhm.
when you get to Korra, which I hope you follow up with the sequel show Korra, that's when there's a lot more negativity towards that show.
Yeah, from what I've seen is so here like what this is my general gist. It's that Avatar is very very good, but it is overhyped by a portion of the fan base who kind of want to remember of it like being like super perfect. Whereas Legend of Korra, from based off what I've seen, from like more reasonable people, again, like I don't have any context on it. From based off what I've heard from like more reasonable people that whose like opinion I trust, it's like yeah, it's okay, but it's got a lot of problems. It doesn't really capture the magic of Avatar. But then that there's a portion of the fan base that just takes it like way too far and like actually it's like the worst thing ever made. And it's like, and I feel like
I don't think that I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's the worst thing ever. A lot of this show has some serious, I think, structural flaws.
mm,
But I mean, honestly, I mean, I could see people saying that Avatar is kind of overhyped. I really, I mean, it's a really, really good show. Like, and I watched it fairly recent. Like, in the last few years, I've rewatched the show. And keeping in mind that it's a kids show, it's not it's specifically designed for kids, like to be on Nickelodeon to appeal to kids. It's easily one of the best shows ever made within that genre,
absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think if not the best, maybe.
if
I'm
not the
trying to
best. Yeah,
think the my video is going to be titled basically like the idea of like this is if because like I'm someone who didn't watch it at all when I was a
yeah,
kid. I knew of it, but I never got into it at all. And so when I threw it on my hey guys, vote for the next long form vid. Um, Obviously, like I knew some people were fans of it, but I
yeah,
did not expect it. Like it won, and then all the comments were like, "Oh my god, this is my childhood," and I
yeah.
was like, "Really? Wow, okay, okay." I didn't realize. I think I must have just missed the boat on it. Um, so yeah, I'm excited because I think I'm coming from a perspective of complete objectivity. Because I
Yeah,
do
yeah,
wonder, and I'm not gonna say that I don't feel the same way about certain shows. Like
yeah.
I'm sure if people point out like actual flaws, like The Sopranos or The Wire, my first gut instinct would be like, "Are you sure?"
Mm.
I don't think I would be like that super defensive of it, but I think part of me would be kind of like, "Well, let's hang on before we like talk about this. Let's talk about how you're wrong first, and then
Yeah.
we'll go into it. Because yeah, I really really enjoyed it. I think it is, if someone ever tells me that, like you kind of alluded to it, if someone ever says to me like, hey man, this show is for kids, or like, hey, it's just a kids show, who cares, this is the show I would point to
Yeah.
say any argument that you can make that, like, hey, a kid show can't explore this idea, or
Hmm.
this is too like risque for a kid show, I
Yeah.
would just point them to this show.
I it's interesting too because I have a one. I watched the show as a kid, but even more than that, I've got a connection to this show because, and maybe you watched some of these videos, but one of the inspirations for me behind the Soprano logs, the series I did where I reviewed every single episode of the show, was the Nostalgia Critics Avatar vlogs. So he was like you; he didn't watch the show as a kid or whatever. I mean, he was a grown man when it came out. But he was going to review the movie, the horrible M Night Shyamalan live action movie, and he wanted to watch the show to have context. So he would watch an episode and he would record himself kind of talking about it, and it was really cool to see him go from like a, oh yeah, it's a pretty good episode, and then slowly over time he's like, oh yeah, this is amazing, this is the best show ever. And it was cool to see that reaction. So I modeled my Soprano logs after that kind of series where I was like, okay, you'll see me kind of give my thoughts on a show episode by episode like he did. But yeah, and the live action, obviously, the M Night Shyamalan version was terrible. They're actually making another live action move. I don't know if it's a movie or a show, but Netflix is doing a live action version. But it seems like they're gonna try to make it better than the M Night Shyamalan version was.
Which isn't saying much. Funny enough, I recently I was like, okay, I'm gonna, because I don't know if I think I told some people in Discord, I'm gonna do a joke where when I put the video out, it's gonna be like Avatar: The Last Airbender, a age defying miracle, but then I'm gonna put a still from the movie, and I'm gonna keep it up for like a day. Um, like, where it's like premiering in like a day, and then of course when the video plays I'll change it and this stuff, but I almost wonder if I shouldn't do that, if people are gonna get like mad pissed.
Nah, but it'll
um
be good engagement if they leave some comments about it.
well, it's funny because I tried, because I'm honestly, I've heard it's really bad, I've seen clips here and there. I But now that I've seen the show, I'm like, okay, I have the full context. So I went back and watched it, and I got about maybe like 11 minutes in, I think, ran at 11 minutes, and it was already so bad, like just in terms of like poor characterization. They they like I think they, at the very beginning, Aang, they skipped the entire journey from when Korra and Katara and Sokka find Aang, all the way to the Water Tribe, and then they skip the entire time that they spend there, and it's like this a lot of character building there and a character development, and they just skip it. It's just like 30 seconds later they're at the tribe, and then 30 seconds later Zuko shows up. It's like, I'll go with you. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're missing so much.
I mean, it's obviously it's going to be. It was never going to be good when you're trying to squeeze an entire series into one single movie. It's just you're not going to get all that great character work. You're not giving the series enough time to breathe, which is, I think, really what Avatar is all about. Which is, yeah, there's the big plots, there's the big fights, all that kind of stuff, but really the show is about these character moments. It's about the journey. It's about these characters kind of growing and becoming different people that really makes this show what it is.
Yeah, it's funny because that's one of my bigger complaints of. Well, it's weird. I have one big complaint of the show, but that's sort of like, it's gonna take a while to sort of like iron out, because I think it's not so much like an issue with the show itself. It's more of I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. It's more of like, there's like I feel like there's like an elephant in the room when it comes to the show that isn't being addressed, or that never gets addressed. But I'll go into that like big in the video, because it's like one of those things where like I have to like really process and like lay it out. But I don't have many big complaints. The ending I think is kind of a cop out. I'm not. I know that's kind of, or even from some of the my in my Discord, a lot of fans, they even said it's like, yeah, the ending is kind of the whole climax with how Aang ends up accomplishing his mission, if you will. Um, yeah, I don't know.
It's that is, I mean, a lot of fans feel that way. I'm like, I kind of get it because what else could they do? It's a kids show, you know. I mean, it's obviously it can be enjoyed by adults, but there's just standards and practices that they couldn't push this kid to kill the guy. And also, I felt like it is his character, right? That this is a kid who doesn't kill. Now, I've kind of had a problem with a lot of animes kind of have that that thematic element to it, like Full Metal Alchemist was another show like that, where it's like, no, we won't kill no matter what. But
Hmm.
for that show, it kind of rang a little bit hollow because that's also a show with like genocide and murder and all this other like really dark, like it's an adult oriented show.
And Avatar too, in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, but to have but more so, you know, more geared towards
More
adult.
explicit. Yeah.
Yeah, so to push that narrative of like it's never okay to kill rang a little like kind of like juvenile to me. Whereas Avatar kind of felt like, yeah, it had these really dark elements, but I believed Aang when it's like, this is super important to me not to kill. Like this is part of my beliefs, my culture, my everything is like it's a part of my who this character is. So you know, it's a little bit, you know, like, oh, okay, it would have been nice if they introduced that kind of that magical element to it, like explained it from earlier on.
Hmm.
Now I will say the lion turtle imagery is actually throughout the show from the very beginning. Like if you go back and watch it again, like and pay attention, or just look up like people like posting screenshots and stuff, you'll see the lion turtles everywhere. So
Really?
it's like a background thing of this world, but they don't necessarily like explain to like, oh yeah, they've got these magic powers. They do in Korra. They expand on it more in that show, which I really would recommend you go check it out once you have time. But you know, for what it is, it was an acceptable ending for me.
Yeah, I have my issues with it, but it's not like a thing where it's like, yeah, like Breaking Bad's ending, I have a lot more issues with that because I think it kind of like it almost casts a shadow over like the show, whereas that doesn't really. So I'm not that's not a huge deal. Another small critique I have, well, it's not really a critique, it's almost like a begrudging praise. Zuko's arc is this is gonna sound weird. I think Zuko's arc is too good. It's almost too. I think it's too good. It's almost like I'm watching it and I'm like, I stopped caring about like Hank and the others, and I'm just like, get back to Zuko, bro, because it's just so layered and so rich and just so everything that I've talked about on my channel about like character building and character arcs and everything. It's like someone like took that and like it's like my wet dream of a character arc, and it's just. But again, it's almost like too good. It's like it almost overshadows the main character's journey to like and like there's it's like, oh well, there are shows where like, you know, the side characters, you know, they have their own arcs and people love it. It's like, yeah, but I don't think to this extent. Like this is almost like too well done compared to Aang's arc.
I can see that. I mean, I think luckily they're very complementary. Like the series goes out of its way from the beginning to demonstrate that like Aang and Zuko are kind of they're very similar people, like different personality types,
Hmm.
but like their struggles are the same of like having this great destiny that they feel that they're forced into and not knowing what to do with it. That's what the Storm episode's all about. It's like Aang ran away from his destiny and Zuko's headed like so far towards it that he's blind to everything around him. Like he's not focused on anything else. And that's the characters contrast each other very well, and I think that's why they work together so well. Um, my one my one thing that I thought was a little bit corny was when they finally get Zuko on the team in the third season, they dedicate like like one episode each to like him working with the other characters. And then it's a bonding for them all. I was like, okay, that's a little bit too, that's kind of like storybook. It just kind of works out so perfectly with them all, but it still works, and he's obviously the most compelling character on the entire show.
It's so funny that you say that because I almost agree, and I almost think it goes back to the my point of like Zuko's arc, where so after the the second half of book three, it's when Zuko joins Team Avatar, and he has his episodes with Sokka, the Boiling Rock, with um, Katara, where they confront Katara's mother's killer. Um, and they're so good because I think that they play off each other well, especially Katara and Zuko. I love that dynamic. But yeah, it was weird because I love those episodes, but it almost felt like it was turning into like the Zuko show. And I'm like, we have like 6 episodes before the finale, and I was kind of weird where I'm like, we have like 6 episodes left, guys. What's like you're kind of like these are fun episodes, but like we aren't we going to get back to Aang like preparing for like the battle of his life? And it kind of felt, and that's why I think the second half of book three, I don't know if I call it the weakest stretch of the show, but it is on the weaker side because I think it is very um weirdly paced. Like they were having fun and it was great, but it was like this is like Endgame. You're like this is like the last act of the show, and you're kind of doing a lot of like fun stuff, which is fun. Like I liked it, but it kind of felt weird in terms of the pacing.
I could see that, and I think luckily the last, is it three or four episodes, right? The
4 episodes, yeah.
four part finale. That one I think is so perfectly paced that it kind of makes
Hmm.
up for it.
Like its own little
But you're
movie,
right.
yeah.
The Zuko episodes, and also the Ember Island Players, which is a really really fun episode. Like it's so interesting to have like a meta like way of
Oh
recapping
yeah.
the show without like but within the universe of the show. That's such a clever idea. It works so perfectly, but in terms of like thematics, even the nostalgia critic, he actually, I wonder if one of the negative videos you watched is his top 10 worst episodes. It's funny. It has the Dante Bosco, the guy the voice act Zuko.
Oh
um
really?
he was also in the Hook movie, that old Robin Williams movie, the Peter Pan one.
Oh
He's in
yeah.
that one too. But anyway, the actor is in that video with the nostalgia critic. You should watch. It's pretty funny.
Really, that's
But anyway,
cool.
even he said like that was like one of his top 10 worst episodes, admitting that it's really fun to watch, but just it's like we're at the end game here, and we're taking a little bit of time to have like this kind of romance subplot and this kind of recap. It's like,
It's funny because I actually obviously the Great Divide I have issues with. The fortune the fortune teller I have issues with. There are some episodes that I have issues with. However, my least favorite, again, it kind of goes along with my big critique of the show, but my least favorite is an episode that some people were actually surprised in my Discord, and it's Avatar Day. Remember that one?
yeah, that's considered one of the less good episodes too.
Okay, because I didn't know because some people in my Discord they said that like they were a little confused, like oh why that one? Um, I actually think that's the worst one, but it's again it's more of a I have to go into it's a very deep reasoning as to why the episode itself. It's not so much the episode itself in terms of structure; it's more the implications of it. But um, however, you mentioned, and it's interesting, you mentioned that one of the ones that was kind of on lower tier is Bacho of the Water Tribe. Why? So I'm curious because actually I thought I really liked that one, and I thought it was actually pretty interesting. Um, so what is or at least from your perspective, what is it about that one particularly that isn't very good?
A lot of people didn't like it because they felt that Aang was being a little bit out of character with hiding the letter and stuff, which I do think is in character because he's trying not to lose the only two people he has now.
That's
But
kind of
some
that's
some
sort of how I
people,
felt. Yeah.
yeah, some people felt it was out of character for him to do that. The other thing that people didn't like is that it's one of those things where it's like, how dare you do this, Aang? We're leaving. We're never gonna talk to you again. And then the next scene is like, actually, you know what? We forgive him. It's just it's the liar revealed like trope where it's like, oh, you know, we found out you deceived us, so we're leaving you. And it's like, oh, okay, never mind, we forgive you. Like a lot of people don't like that trope, and so that episode is not as well regarded. The also the whole June Zuko sub, I don't know if you call it a subplot, but it just wasn't as developed as like some of the other ones too. So I don't think it's like one of like the absolute worst episode, but it's in the community, it's not as well regarded as some other episodes are.
Okay. Yeah, because that was I remember my friend Book in Discord, she asked me about that. She was like, some people don't like it that he lies. And I was like, that was actually not the problem for me. I didn't that
Yeah,
because they built up exactly. I will say I do think that they kind of leaned off of Aang's. It's hard because on one hand I'm like, obviously like it's obviously like, you know, he's a kid, they want to add some humor to the show, and obviously you can argue it's like, well, he's younger and he's trying to have some levity. um and they do develop it early in the show, like his reaction to going to the air temple and finding them gone, and finding out what happened to them and that stuff. But it did kind of seem strange that, like, I don't know, like, again, maybe I'm like just too used to like more like brooding dramas where I'm like, shouldn't Aang be more like fucked up about this? Like
yeah,
it's, but again, it's like on the
that's
other
the
hand, I'm
Zuko
like,
part.
yeah, but then on the other hand, I'm like, I don't want to watch like a 12-year-old boy like sulk. If like if it was the entire thing was just sulking around, like, and so, but again, and then people mention it's like, you know, in his character, he's a kid, he's trying to sort of process it and try to, like, you know, he doesn't really
Yeah,
want to think about it, and then but then when it gets thrown in his face, like the episode where, oh shit, you know, they might leave me, then
yeah,
that trauma comes up. So that was actually
yeah,
one part I didn't mind at all.
yeah. Like I said, I think it works on some level. Like I said, it's just in the community, and that's one of the ones that people kind of bring up. That's not one of their favorites, but I mean, in terms of like the great episodes though, I mean, fuck, there's so many to even pick from, but obviously I have the storm. I absolutely love that episode. I think the dual narrative of who these characters are is fantastic. Zuko alone obviously is considered maybe the best episode of the entire series.
That one's insane. Like, I'm almost like that. It's almost like unfair. Where I'm like, that episode was fucking insane.
Obviously the 4-part finale, you got some absolutely great moments in there. The Day of Black Sun, the 2-parter, um, even though it's more of an action episode, it's still like really fun action.
Oh, I was. It's funny because I put something in my Discord. I was like, this felt like this is like Avengers. This was better than like Avengers Infinity War, because it had the same structure of like all the characters coming together, and then shit goes bad, and then the characters are left worse off. Um, yeah, that was a very well paced episode. The season 2 finale was also excellent. How you think that they're actually gonna, you know, come out on top. It's like it's very. Some people, I had a friend tell me that Day of the Black Sun feels like the Empire Strikes Back, sort of like reversal. But I felt like this book 2 finale very much so was
No, but
Aang
like
was.
book 2 is the Empire, because the whole thing is like structured very similar to Star Wars. They don't
That's
hide it
how
at
it
all.
felt.
If you look at the poster, or not the poster, but the DVD cover for the second book 2, it is like an exact replica of the Star Wars poster. Like look it up.
Okay, is it really?
The whole Sokka and what's her name? Suki, like the way they're holding each other is just like Han and Leia. Um, it's they're not hiding it, the fact that the series was heavily inspired by Star Wars.
Yeah, and that actually, funny enough, goes back to my argument as to, I keep like teasing it, sorry, but I can tell you after, I can kind of explain it, but just to kind of keep it, but that it also kind of goes back to my issues with my one bigger complaint of the show, when you compare it to, because, like, you know, Aang and Luke, you know, this sort of like the hero's journey in a sense, but there's there's an element that belongs in that is in Star Wars that isn't an Avatar based on the character, and that's kind of what I'm um about. Yeah, the Great Divide was really bad. Um, the Fortune Teller was really bad. I didn't like that one. And again, it's more of like the implications of it. Like that one was weird, where it was like because like the whole thing is like at the beginning, it's like, oh, this woman, she's telling all these fortunes, and but it implies that like she's right because like a lot of the fortunes are coming true. But then she's like, hey, the volcanoes are not going to erupt, but then they find out it is erupting, and then they're able to save the town. And then so I'm like, okay, so the episode's point is that like you shouldn't trust this woman. But then Sokka's like, it's like, yeah, guys, maybe this is your sign that you shouldn't use the fortune teller for all things or everything. And I'm kind of like, no, it shouldn't the lesson be like, don't trust this, like this woman's just wrong, like she almost got you all killed. It was, and that's I think that's like another issue I have with the show where it talks a bit about like destiny and fate, but it kind of doesn't run with it as much. Like it kind of like brings it up sometimes, but then drops it a lot, and then it kind of comes into play, but not really. That felt for me like an inconsistent part of the show.
Yeah, I mean, that episode was kind of dumb. Like, I mean, they
Yeah,
even say in the episode, Sokka's like, she was proven wrong, but they're like, no, the village wasn't destroyed, only because they saved the village. But in their mind, it was like, well, that's part of the prophecy, right? It was like she said it wasn't going to be destroyed, and thanks to her fortune, you saved the village, and so like it was correct.
I'm like, what point are you trying to make, writers? Like, what are you
It
doing
was.
here?
I don't think they were trying to make a point with that episode. That was just kind of for fun. There's
Yeah,
that whole girl who's got the crush on Aang. That it's like, eh. Um, they all. I mean, she predicts that Aang and Katara are gonna get married. But I think even she in that episode admits to Katara, like, hey, this is just. I mean, this is just a prediction, right? You are still in control of your own destiny. I get what you're saying a little bit. There is like this kind of Eastern spirituality thing that runs through the show, right? Of like, hey, the avatars are reincarnated, so the cycle is continuing and it's building up to this thing. The whole connection between Zuko and the last avatar, their ancestors, their destinies are intertwined together, um, while also at the same time being a show about no, you control your own destiny too. So it's like,
and I'm okay if it's like unironically that Forrest Gump line where he's like, maybe it's destiny and free will happening at the same time. It's like I'm actually unironically okay with that idea. I kind of like that idea of like it's like, well, maybe destiny does exist, but maybe there are instances where people can kind of uh circumvent their destiny due to enough willpower or love or certain events. I kind of like that idea. I think that's the most, because I think one or the other, because that's the idea like, of destiny and prophecy is such like an ingrained storytelling medium. But the issue is that when you take that too far, it can kind of lead to a lot of like there are a lot of movies and shows where they harp on about like destiny and prophecy, and it just kind of becomes like a crutch where it's like, oh, this happened because it had to happen because, but the prophecy, it's like, that's kind of lame because it takes agency away from the characters in some instances.
what I really like about the show is it goes out of its way. It happens in the third season. It's when Aang learns about what happened between Avatar Roku and the previous Fire Lord.
That was another based episode.
That was a really good episode, and I love that the lesson and Aang spells it out for the audience and for the other characters, which is it's the Fire Nation is not like just evil, like irredeemable people. It's like, no, these are the results of choices that certain people have made, but it doesn't condemn every single person, and it doesn't mean any of these people are beyond redemption. Now, some of them are. Some of them who do these absolutely evil things have to be punished for it, but it doesn't. Like the Fire Nation is not just like a one-dimensional villain. It's like very few shows, kid shows, and even adult shows have that kind of nuanced take. It's like, yeah, this side's just evil, and they're all evil, so fuck them. But I really, really love that Avatar went out of its way to humanize the Fire Nation. There's a whole part when they go through the Fire Nation in disguise and they see that, like, yeah, there's some assholes in the society, and they're being led by an asshole leader. But as a whole, their people are just people, and they're not irredeemable. They're just kind of being led down this bad path.
Yeah, and like I really appreciated the storytelling in book 3, particularly because I remember a lot of people didn't like. I have heard that the headband episode, the episode where Aang
The
goes under,
Footloose
like,
parody.
yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of people I have heard like don't have a really good perspective on that episode, or a sort of like they don't really have a strong inclination to that,
Yeah.
liking that episode. I actually really liked it because it was an episode where, um, obviously the episode Jet from book 1 I really liked. That
Yeah.
was like the episode that kind of made me kind of like sit up a bit, because at that
Yeah.
point, like, the episodic nature of the show was like, I'm like, okay, where is this going to be it until we get to the finale? What's going on here? And Jet was really the episode where I was like, oh shit, this show's kind of based. Like, this show
Yeah.
is not it's not just going to be like Fire Nation bad. Like, this is actually going to be more nuanced. Um, but the headband episode, I really like that because without really like driving it home, it instilled one, like, the Fire Nation, these soldiers are parents. These are Fire Nation kids. They have parents, and they are probably people that Aang may have, squared off with. Also, there was it's kind of like a blink if you miss it moment, but there's the uh, implication that there's a lot of propaganda in the Fire Nation,
Mm-hmm.
that they don't
Yeah.
even really know exactly what happened between them and the
Yeah.
Avatar. And that's kind of hinted at in book 2 with the Earth Kingdom about, they
Yeah.
keep themselves isolated. So so yeah, I actually really liked that episode because it was like, it's especially leading up to the big confrontation. You were like, oh shit, what if these, like, these poor kids, like, these are just innocent people, what if they get caught in the crossfire?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a pretty good one.
I thought the headband was pretty good. I mean, I there's other episodes that I like less, like the Painted Lady. I was like, okay, it's all right. I thought the Runaway was really good for the character stuff between Katara and Toph. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, there's some weaker episodes than the headband. And you know what's funny though about Jet? You bring up, I like Jet, but there's the one thing I don't like about that episode is I always thought it was weird that Sokka was the one who kind of had the rivalry with Jet. When I was like, it should be Aang because Jet's like Katara's like obviously got a crush on this guy.
Yeah.
um why is Aang, who's in love with Katara, also really in love with Jet? Like it should be Aang who had the rivalry. It doesn't make sense. I mean, obviously Sokka can have a rivalry with anyone because he's kind of, pig-headed and does what he and stubborn. But I don't know. I always felt like Aang should have had that role, and that's. I mean, maybe you can say that that's part of the problem sometimes they have with Aang, where he's just a little bit too nice and too friendly. Where I think maybe they could have pushed him to have a little bit more of, like, some like negative qualities.
Yeah, that actually kind of ties in with my biggest complaint of the show. But yeah, I like that Sokka had that moment. I thought that was like a really good, because up until then he was kind of, he kind of felt kind of one note. He kind of was like kind of pig headed, and he was funny, but like, I was like, okay, we're gonna kind of give him some depth. In that episode, that was a really good beat for him.
You know what's a really good episode that he turns his character around is I think it's the fourth one where the Kyoshu Warriors.
Yes,
Um, that one was a really based episode for Sokka to be like, he starts off kind of sexist, and then he's like,
girls.
very quickly is like, hey, I'm sorry. Like, I do respect you. Like, can I learn from you? Like, very humble. And I like they do this really great thing with her, Suki, the girl, where she's not just all girl boss. I feel like a lot of shows go way too heavy into that side. Even she's like, I'm a warrior, but I'm also a girl too, and she kisses him, and it's this really nice moment that I was like, Okay, that's some really nice balance there, showing these girls are strong, but they also have a feminine side too. They're not all like just how a lot of shows portray girl boss characters to be.
Yeah, that was he had some good moments, and I think Sokka's like in comparison to like Zuko's arc, where it was very straightforward and very thematically cohesive. I think Sokka's was more deliberate in the sense that like it wasn't that like every single episode he was like because like you're not really sure exactly what Sokka's like general arc is, but then as you rewatch it, you start to see, oh, it's about him becoming a leader. It's about him learning, and it's never like it's not really like explicitly stated like that he's like I want to be a leader. It's not. It kind of is, but not really. But then it all comes to fruition in the Day of the Black Sun, where he has to step up after his father is injured. So that was really well done. I will say, probably the one disappointment I had in the show, and it's hard because she has such incredible. There's a couple of moments where she has like excellent beats, and I think book three did kind of fix this. Um, is I kind of felt like Katara's arc kind of got lost in the shuffle. Like it because in season one she's like, okay, she wants to prove herself to be a waterbender, but then she kind of like accomplishes that by the end of book one. And then it kind of I feel like she kind of gets lost in the shuffle. I'm kind of like again, she had some good moments, like she her dynamic with Toph is really fun. Um but particularly for book two, which I actually think is the strongest book. I really like book two overall. I really felt like she didn't really have as many. Obviously like they had to introduce Toph and like a lot of stuff, but that was the one where I was like, what is like Katara doing? Like, what is her general arc? Yeah.
I could see that. Season two, she doesn't have as much going on. Season three, she does, like you said, with her
Yes.
mother's killer and learning blood bending and all that kind of
That
stuff.
episode was based. I love that
Really,
one.
really good. Yeah. Um, it's funny. I thought you were gonna say Toph because I felt like the series didn't give Toph a real kind of arc. Even in season three, too, she's the only character I always thought was fucked up. She's the only character who doesn't get an episode with Zuko.
Yeah, I would love to see this too. Yeah.
There's a scene too where she's trying to talk to Zuko about her family or whatever, and he's like, "Hey, we don't have time for this. Like, we gotta find Aang because the battle's coming up." And she's like sad and stuff. There, I just I and this is kind of a trend too with Korra. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but like some of the characters from Avatar are in Korra as well. And I felt like the series kind of screwed over Toph. Like I felt like they had this cool premise for her, but they didn't have anywhere for her to grow as a character. Like there are some
Hmm.
moments here and there, like the runaway, like I said, is a good one. But overall, she grows in terms of power, but I don't necessarily know if she really grows in terms of character.
I think that's absolutely fair. I guess I think I agree with you. I don't think it was much of a blow to me as much. One, because she isn't introduced until book two, so she wasn't. I don't really consider her like. I mean, I guess she technically is, but like when I think of like the major characters, I'm thinking of the four big ones: Zuko, Katara, Sokka, and Aang, and then everyone else is sort of like um, everyone else is sort of they branch off from those. Like Uncle Euro is a main character, but he's a big part of Zuko's story, and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I really like Toph, and yeah, she got some moments, but yeah, I don't think she got, especially because Book Three also introduced. Um, well, I mean, Azula was introduced in Book Two, but in Book Three they gave her more development. And then Mai and Ty Lee, they had to sort of there was that whole episode where they go to the beach, which was pretty good. I one of my big complaints of Book Two was that I felt like they didn't um, develop Ty Lee and Mai enough. They were just kind of there, and I was kind of like, I kind of want to know who these people are. And like they did it in Book Three, but it's like we probably shouldn't be doing this in Book Three. Like, this is
They're
like the
definitely
final
more
chapter.
simple. They're definitely more simple characters
Yeah, which
than
isn't a
a lot
bad
of the other
thing,
ones
but
are. Yeah, I think the series creators intend Toph to be considered one of the main characters. It's
mhm.
five. It's the four of Team Avatar and Zuko who are
Yeah,
really
she
meant to be
really
the leads. Oh, you know what I was gonna say? I just remembered. It was Azula is actually introduced in season one, in the storm when we're seeing the flashback when Iroh's seeing Zuko burned, which is a great shot where you see the flame, like the shadows of the flames lit up on his face. The girl sitting next to him is Azula, and you can even though she's not introduced or called by name, you can see her like smiling as Zuko
Oh,
gets his
really?
face burned. Yeah, it's a oh my god, it's such great character stuff. Now, also they do introduce her at the very end of
The very,
season
very end,
one.
yeah.
But even from the storm, like I said, they knew who this girl was, and you can see her smiling as she sees Zuko getting burned. It's like so fucking evil and great. Like I love Azula.
I actually wonder if I can find it because I have the
Yeah,
file pulled
Google
up.
Google Azula Avatar Book One. You should see next to Iroh. Iroh's looking like he's horrified to see that happen to Zuko, and Azula's like, "Yeah, go, Dad, fuck him up." Yeah, but I mean, obviously, I mean, we should talk about Azula too because
Oh yeah, look at that
what
little
a
bitch.
what a fucking incredible character. One of the best, way better than the Fire Lord as a villain.
Was I? Yeah, I almost kind of like that was another sort of issue with,
He's a little bit more of a generic villain, not gonna lie. But
and
Azula, man, they did such good work with her.
it's weird, and I think that she's a good instance of like how you can have a one note character. Because I guess I mean in book three they do give her some development. It does seem like they tried to give her a lot more come the end of book three, which I don't think they really stuck the landing. I thought I appreciate it, but I don't really know if they stuck the landing there. But throughout book two, I think she's a good character where it shows that like, because on one hand, and this kind of goes to my critique of Ozai, um, on one hand, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, this character is just one note villain," and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I think people kind of get this idea that like, oh, but this character, they all like every single character has to be like super complex and stuff. It's like I don't think so. No, they don't have to be. Your main characters to some extent, or at least a few of them. But yeah, I think having like a character there who's more on the surface, just more like who wears their heart on their sleeve, I think that's absolutely fine. In fact, I actually think it works to sort of like contrast with other characters. Because otherwise it would just be too, it's almost, it's, even a show like Game of Thrones that is praised for like, oh, the characters, no one's good or bad. It's like, yeah, but like there are some characters who are better than others. Like let's not like, um like it's not like everyone's just like this like incredibly morally great person. It's like no, there are different levels that we can kind of, they're all like complicated, they're fleshed out, but they're not like these every character, are they good, are they bad? It's like no, we kind of can know. But yeah, I think Azula is a good example, especially in book two, of how a character can be kind of one note but still be very entertaining and interesting.
Yeah, I think what they were setting up with Azula, even from the very beginning, was her need to control. And when she's in control, she's cruel and she's powerful and all that stuff. But when that starts to break a little bit, then all hell breaks loose and her whole identity kind of shatters. You see that a little bit in the first scene where she's introduced in season two, where she's on the boat training with the two old ladies.
Hmm.
She gets one thing wrong, right? They're like almost perfect, but there's one hair loose on her head, and you can see in her eyes for that minute, like she looks up at that hair, and it's like you can see absolute fucking rage about to break through her very cold kind of facade. Um, and they establish that later on in season three, right? When May and Ty Lee betray her, she just completely loses her shit. She's like all her sanity is like breaking when just one thing goes wrong. So I think that's what they were trying to set up throughout the whole thing with her, is like the cruelty and the coldness are just part of this kind of facade she's trying to maintain to keep herself in control.
Hmm. It was interesting too because a friend of mine actually, on through Discord, they mentioned that the show is actually originally supposed to be 4 seasons, and the creator, one of the big things they mentioned they were going to explore was like a redemption arc for Azula. Um, and I think they kind of were trying to do that at the end of book 3, and I don't think they did a bad job. I think they were able to flesh her out enough where you could kind of tell that she was just as much of a victim of her father as um, Zuko was to an extent. Um, but yeah, but I was like, oh, that's fine. But I really liked her as a character. Um, it's funny because yeah, one of the big things that I have heard in general was that Ozai is kind of underdeveloped, and it's interesting because for me, I actually didn't have a problem with Ozai being underdeveloped. What I had a problem with is that, um, and I'll have to rewatch it, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. At no point before the final battle between him and Aang do we get a sense of his power level. Like I think because I think at the in the final episode or the finale, that's the first time we see him like go toe to toe or fight. And I'm like, I feel like that we should have had, and it's sucks because there's a perfect place where, um, the day of the solar eclipse when after they go in. So he's talking with Zuko and he tells him the truth about his mother. That was also a really cool twist. I like that. Um, okay, so after that scene, then have Ozai go out and like clean house. Just have him like fucking decimate the fleet. Like he should have been the one to do that. Because then not only does it put our characters in a really terrible spot, but it illustrates just how powerful this motherfucker is. Um, yeah, and it's like I obviously like I could tell that he was like a badass because everyone was saying it, but I was like, I think we needed to see that. We needed to show him do like go hard before that, so we can really emphasize, particularly in the second half of book 3, really emphasize Aang's anxiety of like, oh shit, what if I can't do this? Like, did you see that guy? He like fuck shit up. Do you have oh sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I was just gonna say that would have been cool.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, do you have a favorite and least favorite episode?
Like I said, I mean, favorite. It's so hard to pick from. There's so many good ones. Like I said, Zuko alone, the 4-part finale, um, even like I said, the storm, the Kyoshi Warriors. Just there's just so many great moments in there. When they lose Appa, that's another incredible. I love seeing Aang um, in places where he's the kind of nice personality breaks away,
Hmm.
and we see just the absolute power that's in this kid. Like he could destroy nations, like with his when he's in the Avatar mode and stuff like that. Least favorite, I mean, just some of the ones I brought up before, like obviously the Divide. I'm gonna actually look up some episodes. Like I don't remember them all.
It's funny because the Great Divide, I didn't know anything about the show leading into it before watching it. Very, 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 very little. However, the only thing I knew about it pretty much was that there's one episode that fucking sucks. And it was the Great Divide. And it was so poorly regarded that it like broke free from like the fandom. And it's like even people who have never seen the show know that this episode sucks. And what was interesting is that I actually conceptually I thought the episode was really good. I liked the idea of like, oh, they're really like, talking about, the Avatar is not just a force of power, but also a peacekeeper. And like even if we're able to defeat the Fire Lord, we have to make sure that people can work together. And generally I thought the episode was fine. Like I don't really understand why we didn't see those two tribes come back. Like, why didn't we see them in the book 3 when we really should have? That was kind of silly. Um, but it was so weird because like up until the very end of the episode, I'm like, why don't people like this episode? I don't get it. And then the very very last 10 seconds of the episode, I'm like, okay, I get it. That's why. That's exact. And I was like, fuck. You could have gone, and there's so many ways you could have not done that, but like, ugh,
Yeah, it's I don't know. I think they're trying to be kind of subversive to be like, haha, we lied. But
so weird.
it just kind of, yeah, there was an opportunity there to kind of demonstrate Aang's role as like a peacekeeper and a mediator and all this kind of and a force of balance. I also thought the tribes weren't really developed well. It's like this tribe is messy and this tribe is
Yeah.
neat. And it's like, oh, isn't that cute how Katara and Sokka are kind of, it's like it's juvenile, just like the conflicts between Katara and Sokka are juvenile because they're surface level differences. Really, who when at their core they get along well, but it's just these like, aha, Sokka likes meat like this tribe likes meat. So that's obviously a very bad one. Um, Tales of Bossing Say obviously is really well regarded, especially the Tale of Iroh.
Hmm.
Very, very sad. Um, Bitter Work. I really like that episode as well. I like that's the one where Zuko is learning about the lightning, how to redirect lightning, and Aang is learning about the earth bending.
Oh, and Toph is like kicking his ass. That was a good one. Yeah.
There's a good one. There's a line that Zuko has in that episode where he's trying to get the lightning to hit him during a thunderstorm, and he's like, you've never held anything back from me before, so hit me. Like, and it's very sad. Like, it's like he's like crying while the rain's going on. It's a good moment. That's one of those lines that kind of stands out to me. Yeah, there's just so many fucking good episodes.
It's funny because simultaneously, while I think that Katara's arc was really sort of like kind of lost its way, or it kind of like got sort of like sidelined. Book three had the Puppet Master was excellent, and the Southern Raiders, where she confronts the killer, was like I think it was kind of cliche in a sense, like because we've seen like the confronting, and then um but that one little detail at the end, how because again they could have just made her like confront him, and he's like he's still an evil raider, and she's like but then she spares him. But the fact that they had him as like a meek farmer who has like been retired, I really like that, because it's again it's kind of, I guess you could say, cliche in a sense, but I was like, yeah, that's fine, as long as if it works. um
There's a
yeah.
great arc there where I mean, obviously in the Puppet Master, she learns the blood bending unintentionally, right? It's kind of forced on her. And the Puppet Master lady even tells her, now that you know this power, it's going to corrupt you. And we see in that episode, she uses it, even though she vowed, to never use the power again. Because it's very evil. It's very like it's gross to use it on people. But she uses it because she's so consumed by vengeance, and even it it really lends credibility to when Sokka and Aang are like, Katara, you're going too far. Like, this isn't cool. I thought it was really well done, that kind of arc, and then by the end, she's ready to let it go. Um, and I think it also lends credibility to the ending too, where it's like the show has kind of established that like you don't have to give in to hatred, you don't have to give in to revenge. You can just let it go. And I think thematically that's what the ending was trying to go for too.
Yeah. Um, and that is kind of what my bigger complaint is in regard to, because obviously it connects to Star Wars with um, Luke, and it's. I was talking with a friend in Discord, and he put it really well. What's so interesting about Luke's final confrontation at the end of Return of the Jedi is not only can he put it really well. He said, not only can Luke fail, he can make the wrong decision. By that I mean he can try to defeat Vader and the Emperor, and he can fail, and he can be killed, and it's just over. But also, even if he does defeat Vader, he might still be lost. He might still, that's like the whole thing, like let the hate consume you. It's like, even if you kill Vader, what if you take his place? And so that's where like the tension comes from, because you're afraid that like no matter what happens, shit might still go bad, or like something bad could still happen. And then but then of course, there's it ends up working out. That is kind of what my issue with the end of Avatar is, where I feel like, and it's kind of due to the nature of the ending, the sort of like Deus Ex Machina. It feels like it feels like that aspect of Aang's character is kind of, because I mean, like I've talked about before in writing, I think like if I were to give like what makes good drama, like for a character, and what I always say is give your character an impossible choice and make them choose. Like just put them in a situation where it's like an impossible choice, and then make them do one or the. It doesn't matter which one, but you can have either work, but they have to do something. And it kind of felt like the ending kind of was kind of like skirt, like, well, maybe he doesn't have to. And that was kind of where I'm like, because to your point, you said the theme is like I agree where it's like they set up with Katara's arc and even Zuko's arc where it's like, hey, you don't have to give in to this. You don't have to. Um you can find a middle ground. Whereas it felt like the ending of Avatar kind of instead of making Aang make that choice on his own, it kind of gave him an out. And that's kind of why. And again, it's not like the biggest deal because I still see how it fits with the themes, but I was kind of like, I kind of wish he kind of went all the way.
I could see that. And you know what? Two things actually. One, to your point about Star Wars, that's something that I honestly felt like the original trilogy didn't. I don't think they did that well at all either. Like I never saw Luke as like really ever being in danger of giving in to the dark side, because they just never really set it up with his character that he lusted for kind of stuff like this. Now, I will say the prequels, for all their problems, kind of did this better with Anakin, where it's like,
Absolutely.
no, I believe that this kid would go into the dark side, but Luke, like, not really. It's similar to what we talked about in the Harry Potter episode, where they tried to set up this thing where it's like, ooh, Harry is kind of like Voldemort, so there's a chance he could go to the dark side. And I'm like, not
Like, oh man,
really.
what if
Like,
he's fucked up? And it's like, no, he's not.
yeah, no, he's not like that. So that's the interesting thing about Star Wars. But two, the one thing I also don't like about the thematically Aang's journey was in the Guru episode, right? In the Crossroads of Destiny, um, they set up that like, okay, in order to master the Avatar state, you have to let go of your worldly attachments, including Katara. Now,
Mhm.
that doesn't mean people misinterpret that. That doesn't mean that he can't love Katara or he can't even be with Katara. He still can. But what Aang didn't understand was he he viewed Katara with this kind of very personal attachment. Like he wanted her to be his, to be with him, and that was kind of tethering him spiritually to the earth, and it wasn't letting him kind of be the spiritual master. You know, it's just kind of like Eastern philosophy. I'm not saying that that's exactly what Buddhists believe or anything, but that's what they were trying to go for. Like he could still love Katara, but he just couldn't be attached to her like in the way that he was. Um, and they don't ever resolve that because the way he gets the Avatar state back is he hits his spine against the rock and it kind of lets his chakra flow again, and that's how he gets the Avatar state back. Which I thought was kind of like they're not really addressing Aang's problem, which was his overt attachment to Katara, which they actually talk about it a little bit in Ember Island Players. Actually, he tries to kiss her when she's not ready, and he's like, "Damn it! Why did I do that?"
Yeah.
But it's because he wanted her too badly, and he wasn't letting himself be free in the way in spiritually in the way that he needed to as the Avatar. So I felt like they didn't address that issue the way they should have.
It's funny you mentioned that because I agree. I think they do set up Luke's, you know, whether or not he might go to the dark side. They do set it up a bit in Empire, where he's like trading with Yoda, and they. However, I do agree with you. Even though they set it up, I kind of was the same with you. I never felt like he would. That was the difference, where it's like even if I know in the back of my head it's not going to happen, because like that would be a weird ending. But like even if I know in the back of my head it's not going to happen, I still need to believe it might happen. I still need to kind of like believe. And again, like perfect example, like you said, uh, Hayden Christensen for all of his faults and those. I feel like it's not really his fault. I feel like it's Lucas's fault. Um, for all the faults of the prequels, yeah, that was a perfect example of like, hey, here's this like kid who like you think is cool and chill, and then oh shit, now you can actually buy that he's starting to kind of like go down a bad path. Um, and what's interesting, and what kind of irked me so much about that in Avatar was that, as you pointed out, there was that great arc in book 2 where after Appa gets kidnapped, we see Aang kind of like go fucking kind of lose it. He starts snapping it off, and he starts kind of like getting like, where is he? And he starts like, the Sand Raiders. He was like, he almost like went too far until Katara calmed him down. Um, and I was like, oh, you could have totally explored that of like maybe Aang, maybe simultaneously while Zuko is becoming more peaceful and he's starting to see the light, maybe part of Aang, due to his trauma, he's starting to kind of go towards the dark side. But I never really felt like that was ever going to be a possibility. It never felt like that was, they kind of like touched upon it, but it never really felt like that was ever going to happen. Um, so basically, like I kind of been dancing around it, but basically my main contention is, and um, that's why Avatar Day is my least favorite episode. In that episode, I thought they were going to introduce the idea. So, like, the whole plot of the episode is Kyoshi. This whole village hates Kyoshi because you killed our leader years back. And I was like, oh shit! So maybe they're going to introduce this idea that like sometimes avatars, because again, like avatars are supposed to be peacemakers. They're supposed to create peace, but sometimes like getting peace, or like accomplishing peace or attaining peace, sometimes you might have to do things that you don't want to do. Sometimes, like a and perfect example in the Great Divide, where, and it's a shame because they don't like explore it, but like, hey, maybe Aang felt like he had to lie in order to kind of put this issue to rest, and maybe he didn't want to do it, maybe he felt shitty about it, but he had to. That was like, it was the only solution I could think of. And so I thought they were going to introduce this idea that like, hey, maybe even though they're the Avatar and they're seen as like these perfect figures, and they do kind of explore it at the end, but I think it's a little bit too little too late. um this idea that like, hey, maybe avatars aren't perfect, maybe they can kind of quote unquote go to the dark side, and that would introduce the possibility for Aang. But then in that episode, they're just like, no, Kyoshi was right. Your leader was actually a psycho tyrant. And then also, she didn't even kill him. He fell. And I was like, come on, man. Like, you're going to let Kyoshi off the hook? Like, that felt like if anything, I actually think that was more of a cop out than the ending. Hmm. I almost was more mad after that scene than I was. Because again, like you said, I think with both um, Roku and um, the waterbender, I think those are examples of like, hey, here's how the avatar can be like, the avatar is like this, political figure. They're like this, this destined messiah, but they're also human and they can make mistakes. um but with Kyoshi, it was like, so I guess my argument would be like, when it comes to, and again, it's so frustrating because it fits so perfectly with Aang's arc. What if Kyoshi did feel like she had to kill the tyrant guy? What if he was a tyrant? And what if she had no other choice? She was like, I tried to reason with him, but he left me no choice, and I didn't want to do it. It goes against everything I believe in, but otherwise it would have led to a lot of bad. And that it would have been so perfect because it fits perfectly in with Aang's final conflict of, hey, I know you don't want to do this, but you might have to, and you have to be okay with that. And I felt like and then also, that's another thing. I almost think it ruins her character because by not killing him, she leaves him like, yes, she separated her island from, then that's how that's why the Kyoshi Warriors and everything. But you're still letting that tyrant go. You're still letting him roam, and he could have killed people in the meantime, and or maybe that could have been explored, where Kiyoshi was like, I didn't kill him because it went against my code, and then that tyrant guy ended up like doing a lot more bad stuff, and now I feel bad about that, and like, okay, so yeah, so you could have explored that, you could have set up Aang's final decision with that, but it really felt like I that's my least favorite episode for that reason. It feels very much like a cop out.
They they address some of these things in the comics. So there's a whole uh comic book series that takes place after it bridges the gap between the first show and then Korra.
Hmm.
And so they discuss some of these issues there, that like some of the things the avatars did set up problems for future generations. And in fact, there's actually a cool moment where Aang is kind of like, hey, you previous avatars, like, I know you have wisdom, but this is a new changing world, and I have to kind of use my own judgment moving forward. And it's kind of like, sorry, I'm just gonna do my own thing from now on. So I thought that was kind of cool. But you're right. I mean, some of these things don't get developed as much as they probably could have been, because, like I said at the beginning, it is a kid show with certain standards and practices where it's like, it might not have been the best look for this avatar to be killing people or whatever. I know we're
Yeah,
at our hour here, but we can give our kind of final thoughts.
yeah, and I understand that, but it's like on one hand, I'm like, I understand, like, it's like, oh well, there's certain the kid show, but like on the other hand, I'm like, in the third episode of the first book, you like straight up like almost explicitly discussed like a genocide of like an entire air temple. In episode 10 of book 1, you talked about, like, you explored the theme of like domestic terrorism, because like Jet, you think he's cool, but then he's gonna kill innocent people. And so I'm like, but then funny enough, later on they end up giving him a whole redemption arc too, or like a semi redemption arc. And then funny enough, in book 2 they end up killing him too. um so I'm
But
like,
they
on one
do it
hand
off
I'm like,
screen, and even they make fun of that
even they
in
make fun of
Ember
it,
Island
yeah.
Players. Yeah,
But I think that goes to show that, like, hey, there are ways that you can explore these themes without it being explicit. Like, even at the finale, if like Aang clapped his hands and like it was like a flash of white and then Ozai was just gone, it's like whatever, Um, yeah, like on one hand, because I don't want to. That's sort of like the general gist of like what I'm going to explore. It's like I think it's like unfair to simultaneously like give the show credit for exploring all these adult themes. It almost feels like a little kid who, it almost feels like a teenager who like wants to act like an adult, like he's like, I want all the responsibilities and I want to act like an adult, but doesn't want the consequences, where it's like, on one hand, I'm like, I agree that like I understand the show was for, it was very unprecedented that this show was exploring these themes, but I don't think that I don't think that negates the fact that it didn't fall through with those themes enough, because I think the show proved that it could explore the themes in like very clever storytelling ways and get the point across, even if they didn't explicitly show like Kyoshi, like it's like, it's not like we would have seen a scene with her like slitting the dude's throat or something, but like, they could, I think they could have still driven the point home.
you need to watch Korra, because I'm very curious how you're gonna come away,
I'm
because they address some of these things in Korra, but there's also other stuff that you might have a problem with, and I'd love to talk to you about Korra in the future when you eventually get to that.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna doing Hannibal next after Avatar. I'm probably after that, I'm probably gonna do, so funny enough, we were gonna talk about the writer's strike tonight, but I didn't realize you saw Avatar, so that worked out. But there are 3 shows ending in the next couple weeks. Succession, Ted Lasso, and Barry. All of which I really love. So I'm probably after Hannibal, I'm probably going to do one of those. I'll let people vote on it. Um, and then Cora, maybe I might give it a break. I don't
You
know.
don't. I don't you don't necessarily need to make a video out of it, but I really would like you to see Korra because it's good. Like I'm not gonna lie,
I'll put it on the list.
you should just watch it. You should just watch it for fun, and then we can just talk about it. But it's a very interesting show that I think the praise of that show it deserves praise for kind of expanding on some of these themes and elements from it's a little bit more adult oriented than the regular Avatar was, but there are some storytelling structural issues that would be interesting to discuss. So I recommend just like if when you're not in the mood to watch stuff for work, like try to watch Korra because it's very interesting.
Yeah, I've heard. I know the sort of fandom, the anti fandom, I should say, I guess, response
Season
to
three
it
is
is.
lit, dude. Season three of Korra is lit. It is good,
I heard season 3 is really good.
really good.
But then season 4 kind of tears off, I guess.
Season three is on par with the best that the main series ever had to offer. Like
Really.
it is fucking lit, dude.
But then
Anyway, we're at our
I
time here,
know,
so
yeah,
we're gonna sign off. But thank you all for watching, and maybe we'll talk about the Writers Guild strike next time. If it's who knows, it might not, it might still be going on by the time we
yeah,
record
maybe
next
we'll
time.
see maybe the effects will be more pertinent. So we'll see.
All right, cool. Talk to you guys then.
Take care, y'all.